My name is Andell Brown. I'm the founding partner of Andell Brown and Associates, where we defend people's freedoms, we restore the injured, and we protect your rights. We specialize in criminal defense, personal injury, and civil rights violations. I'm here with MonaLisa Weber.
Hi, Andell. My name is MonaLisa Weber. I'm the founder of Probation Station. I'm a former probation officer who teaches proactive measures on how to maneuver through the system here in Florida. And I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Free Meekmill is trending all over Twitter. You see it on Instagram. You've heard a number of celebrities weigh in on it, from Jay-Z to Kevin Hart to many, many more. It's become synonymous with the criminal justice system and what some people are calling a great injustice. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, and I'm glad you're here with us to talk about that.
It's it is a little bit out of control in my opinion. I think our community needs to understand how the system actually works, right?
Because not everybody has millions of dollars and high-profile lawyers to go after,
Right.
situations like this. So in order for people to protect themselves, they need the knowledge.
I think that's key, the education part, because you can be proactive if you understand what you're getting into. So I take a lot of pride in really teaching that, especially my experience with the criminal justice system as a former probation officer.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, that being proactive. And I think the first step in being proactive is understanding what really is probation. What is it?
Okay, so probation is a set of rules, right, that you must follow. It's an alternative to jail or prison. Or it can be, usually depending on what charges, it's what's called a non-prison sanction, which means you can pretty much do anything outside in the community versus going to jail or prison.
Okay.
So when you sign up for probation, because what people need to understand is that probation is something that you sign up for, that the state attorney is offering you. So
When you sign on the dotted line.
when you sign on the dotted line, you made an agreement. It's a contract, and you must follow these rules.
Now, one of my contentions with probation, or the way I've kind of looked at it as a defense attorney through the years, when I talk to my clients, I let them know that probation, if you're not going to do probation for real, then it's a trap. And the reason I say that to them is because when you're charged with a crime, in order for you to get convicted, the state has to prove you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Sometimes they have a hard time doing that. Or they may just look at your file, and just like you said, you may only score out to a non-jail sentence, so they offer you probation. Now, the case may be weak, and there's a lot of things we can do at trial, and I think we might be able to win the case, but that person's looking at it saying, look, the case is going to be over with, I'm not going to prison, I just want to end this, I'm going to jump on the probation. One of the things I always ask them to consider is the fact that if you take probation, and like you said, you sign on that dotted line, then it's much easier for the state to prove your probation violation than they would have had to prove you guilty at trial, right?
Right.
Another difference is that when we go to trial, you have a jury of your peers making the decision. And in order for you to get convicted, the state has to convince all of those jurors that you're guilty of a particular crime. Now, at probation violation, they only have to convince the judge.
Right.
That's a totally different situation, right?
Really, yeah. And it's difficult to defend a probation violation, I think, at some times. Because if you broke the rules, you broke the rules.
Mm-hmm.
You just broke the rules. So the probation officer has a duty to inform the judge of the violation. And it could be simple things like failure to report, failing a drug test. It's just the simplest things that people are not aware of. Failure to pay your monetary obligations. And these things are not really discussed to the defendant at that time. I think a lot of it is also like the courtroom and being afraid and fear and people just really wanting to like get out of there.
Right.
So there's just a lot of signing on the dot.
So you're saying that a lot of times people that are on probation, they don't know the rules of probation.
Not at all.
So I think one of the best things for them to do is talk to their probation officer about what they actually have to do, and talk to their lawyer because their lawyers should be able to sit them down and explain to them, like I explain with my clients, what this probation is all about. What are the things that you have to do? I think that'll be helpful to a lot of people, don't you?
I completely agree.
Right.
I do agree with that. However, the system is so congested, right? I always say it's like a factory. I truly don't believe that people have time to dig in the intricacies, or the probation officers, they don't have time to dig in the intricacies of their rules and regulations. So when they instruct someone, it'll be like, okay, do you understand? Yes, you got to report every month, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do that. But when you don't show up to that parenting class or that anger management class, or there's like layers to it, right? It gets confusing. Or when you sign the dot in court, and then you go to your probation officer, and your probation officer says something like, you have to pay $180 a month. In your mind, you're like, what in the world? What do you mean?
Right. Where did that come from?
You're not really understanding that this is what you agreed to in court.
So sometimes the probation officer doesn't even understand all of the rules in order to instruct the person on probation what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do.
I'm not gonna.
It's all right. You can say it.
Yeah.
You can tell me.
I'm not gonna say that the probation officer doesn't understand. I'm gonna say that a lot of probation officers don't have time.
Or they don't take the time in some cases.
Right. They don't take the time. They're overworked and underpaid.
Understood.
And the caseloads, specifically here in South Florida, are fairly, really high.
Okay. And, that kind of goes back to when I worked as a public defender, and you really are working hard and you're fighting for people and you're doing your best, but you have such a high caseload, it makes it difficult to give the case the attention that it needs. Now, obviously, someone like Meekmill doesn't have that problem. He's hired private attorneys. He has several attorneys, high-profile attorneys, that I assume have staffs and paralegals to go and do the work and other things and, go through it with a fine-tooth comb. That's the same things we seek to do here for our clients, is to make sure that we leave no stone unturned when it comes to defending them. So what are some of the consequences of violating the probation, or how do we get to a point like in the case of Meekmill where you're serving 2 to 4 years in prison? That sounds crazy to people for what they said was, popping a wheelie or this fight in St. Louis at the airport. How do we get to that situation? What happens when you don't abide by the rules?
So what happens is when you don't abide by the rules, your probation officer has to notify the court, because what you agreed to, you failed to comply to. So in order for the probation officer's documentation to be in order, they must notify the judge that a violation occurred. The more you violate, what happens is there's points. This is a point system, right? So you have, in the state of Florida, you have the sentencing guidelines, the criminal punishment code. So every time you violate your probation, there's points that are being added to your sentencing guidelines, right? So every single time he violated, which I hear is anywhere from 4 to 5, maybe 6 times, there were points added.
So he's not looking at the same situation the 4th time he violates as he does the 1st time.
No, under no circumstances.
So let's take the example you gave, and we're talking about between 4 to 6 violations of probation. Maybe the first time you go in and you violate, and the violation is based on, look, there was a fight at the airport in St. Louis, I really wasn't involved, case was dismissed. Or there was an arrest in New York, which they ultimately dismissed, popping a wheelie on the bike, some reckless driving. Is that something that's going to send you to prison for 2 to 4 years on a first violation?
Probably not. Probably not, right? It's a nonviolent offense, let's say. But then we're dealing with different states, right? So every state is different. So I don't want to, I'm speaking more on a general level, right?
In general.
Let's get that clear, because society tends to pinpoint everything.
Right.
So we're speaking in general. So when you violate your probation, it's a nonviolent offense. The judge may give you a chance depending on the circumstances, right? So you have, okay, you violated once, all right, reinstate, which means they put you back on probation.
Right.
Or they may reinstate and modify it. So let's say maybe with the fight, let's say in St. Louis, right? Okay, maybe he needs anger management. So they may reinstate and modify and add the anger management. I honestly want to say in the state of Florida, they probably would have sent an average man to prison by 2nd or 3rd violation. And, you're a defense attorney, so you probably...
Absolutely. I've seen, to be honest with you, I've never seen anyone with 5 or 6 probation violations. if you are continually violating probation, probably by the third or fourth time, third time maybe, you're looking at they're going to revoke your probation and sentence you to prison. That's what happens to most people in the state of Florida that I've witnessed, not necessarily all of them being my clients, but I've witnessed people going through the system, is that if you're continually violating probation, there's not going to be any further violations after 3.
Right. For the most part, like, you know, I'm getting calls and stuff, and I'm not even like surprised. To me, I mean, he earned his way to prison, right? I'm not surprised at it at all, because I was like, what's the whole commotion about?
Well,
I
think a lot of people are looking at the fact that we have a charge that he picked up when he was about 18. He was a young man. You know, he picked up this weapons charge, and even the facts surrounding him picking up that charge, they say he was going to the store, cops beat him up, they claimed he was running after them with the gun. I like to call a lot of arrest affidavits I read creative writing, because sometimes I don't think they're entirely accurate.
I agree with you.
All right.
You can kind of tell the ones when, I remember when I was a probation officer, you see the, I'm like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
You know,
I remember one time I was representing a group of kids in juvenile delinquency court, and they had 5 different arrest affidavits for all 5 of these kids. Now, these kids were accused of stealing a jar with money, like a money jar from somewhere. And in all 5 of the kids' affidavits, each one of them was carrying the jar. I'm like, 5 kids all can't be carrying the same jar, you know what I mean?
I like that.
So, you know, it's a little creative writing, and people are saying that in his case, that's what brought him there in the first place, so they feel like the underlying charge was unjust, and then they're saying, how do you keep someone on probation for 12 years? Anybody's gonna mess up when they're on probation for 12 years. But in this case, he wasn't sentenced to 12 years probation, was he?
No, he was originally sentenced, and I want to say this, as it relates to the circumstances of the first case. I don't know all the details, but again, he agreed to that.
Right.
See, this is what we need to get our community to understand. He agreed to that, right? So when you agree to something and then you serve your time, you get out, and you're on probation, and you know you're on probation,
accountability.
You have an accountability, and you have a responsibility. And as it relates to Meekmill, I look at it like you are in a position where you don't have any financial struggles. You can pay. You can pretty much chill out, do your thing, follow the rules and regulations. But every single time, you're just setting yourself up, because when you get when he was released, I think it was 4 years probation, followed by 4 years probation. He violated. Right. He violated his probation. So then, instead of sending him back to prison, they gave him a chance and extended his probation.
So they modified it.
They modified it, and they extended it.
Okay, so they gave him instead. So you're saying that at the time when he violated the first time, the judge could have said, you know what, back to prison.
Right, because the original charge sent him to prison. So the probability of when you get out and you violate, coming out of prison, probably going to go back into prison, right? And you know better than me. You're right.
I do know, and I think that's one of the things that kind of gets lost in the shuffle when people are talking about this case. Because when I look at the fact that he had these multiple violations, 4 or more, number one, that's shocking in and of itself. But he also was sent back to jail for a long period of time in a previous violation. Now, everybody that deals with these types of cases, deals with probation, knows that if you're getting punishments that involve jail time or prison time, they keep going up. They usually don't go up and then go down.
Yeah, right.
If you violated before and they gave you 9 months in jail, the next time you violate, you should expect a prison sentence, because the court is pretty much communicating to the individual that we've given you opportunities, okay, you violated, we said, all right, this is gonna be the punishment, and it doesn't seem like you're getting it. And I think one of the things a lot of people don't understand is what is the purpose of the court in criminal justice in their state. For instance, in Florida, when you look at the code, the law that dictates what happens in the criminal justice system, it says the purpose of this law is punishment. And if you don't understand that, you think that, well, you know, shouldn't they give me a chance to turn my life around and get better and, you know, blah, blah, blah. That's nice. A judge can take that perspective if they so choose. But if you're in a state where the law is written in a way that the goal is punishment, then you have to understand that every violation, they're going to say, okay, we're going to punish you in this way. And if you don't get the message, we're going to increase the punishment. And it looks like that's what was happening here in Meekmill's case.
I completely agree. In Pennsylvania, I don't know if there's a score system. You know, in Florida, we have a point system. Every charge has points.
Right.
Right. And every time you violate, specifically in the state of Florida, a technical violation, which a technical violation is anything outside of an arrest.
Right.
So if we talk about Meekmill, we're discussing failure. He failed
to inform when he's traveling.
Right, like that was, that drove me crazy.
I mean, look, he's a busy rap star. He has a career that's taken off. There are probably people that handle these things for him. And here's what concerns me, and part of the reason, just to kind of go off on a tangent and say why we're here today. When I look at what's going on and I look at the things people are saying, right, I wonder, where were all these people before Meekmill got sent to prison? All these people that are speaking up, that are talking about what happened, where were they to help him stay on track and get this probation over with so he could be free from the justice system hanging over his head? Because he has such a promising career. He sold millions of records. He just dropped his last album, Wins and Losses, which to me was one of his best work. And you would think that the people from Rock Nation, the people from Dream Chasers, his crew, the people that are around him would say, look, he's the reason that we're all making money. He's the reason that we're all having these experiences. We need to make sure that before Meek Mill's travels, we're going to do what we need to do. We need to make sure that if something is going to violate his probation and possibly send him back to prison, we're going to keep him away from it, or we're going to keep that influence out of his circle. Where were those people? I don't understand that.
That's what they need to hire me. That's what I say. They need to hire me.
Well, I mean,
but the thing, that's how, I mean, we see it every day locally. Okay, let's not, I understand that he's a celebrity, but let's just talk about real life.
Right.
Right, real life. Most of our young brothers and sisters, no one is around to help them with the criminal justice system. No one is concerned about that, and I feel that when you're at that level, they're probably, you know, they may think that they're better than the system, or that they can fix it with, right, you know, that they can facilitate. But at the end of the day, is if you don't hold yourself accountable, how do you violate for failure to get permission to travel out of the state for a concert? Let's be honest.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I really don't know.
Right.
And that particular facts I'm not familiar with, but I've seen that there were violations for numerous reasons, and violations that happen time and time again. One of the things that I would be aiming for if I was Meek Mill's attorney, or I was someone at Rock Nation or Dream Chasers or MMG or any one of the different business people that he's associated with, we would be trying to early terminate his probation. You can do that. You can get through your probation earlier. Like, let's say you're given 5 years probation.
Right.
You can actually finish that in 2.5, right?
Right.
How does somebody do that?
Oh, well, what happens is, pretty much, if you've complied with all your terms and conditions, your monetary obligations, which are your court cost of supervision, if you've paid it in a timely fashion, if you haven't violated, right? Well, depending on circumstances, you may violate once. You know, it could be something minor, but usually it's, I guess the best case scenario is no violations, complying with all your terms and conditions.
If you do what you got to do, you can get off probation early.
If you do what you're supposed to do, for the most part, you're getting off probation.
Okay. Now, in Meek Mill's situation, let's just go through a couple of the different things that we can do to improve our situation. Let's say you're not Meek Mill and you're not famous and you don't have all these high-powered lawyers. What can you do to help yourself make it through probation successfully?
I think that when you get offered a plea by the state attorney, you need to take it home and review it and think about it and think about the fact, can I do this? You know, does my finances allow me to do this? How much money do I need to pay? What are the programs involved? Do the research. Okay, if I have to take anger management, how much is anger management per month or per week? If I have to take a parenting class, how much is that? Because a lot of it revolves around finances and being able to go from one location to another, missing work, coming to, either missing work or doing different programs. Things like educating yourself on the language, the courtroom lingo, being proactive with your probation officer, right? So getting all their contact information, knowing when to report, because they're going to let you know, but being proactive. So, Officer so-and-so, I'm going to be late. Officer so-and-so, on January 2018, I'm traveling to this. Is there any way I can get a travel permit? You have to be ahead of the game.
Right. And one of the other things, because sometimes you get a difficult probation officer that makes it difficult for you to work with them. And one of the things I've always encouraged my clients to do is to document. If you have a probation officer and you're telling them something, and then you don't want to be in a situation where they come in court and they say something else. So if you have an email or even if you have a cell phone number, you send it in a text, you send it in an email saying, probation officer, this is what I'm doing. This is when I go to work. My schedule has changed. Instead of working on Fridays, I'm working on Wednesdays from this time to that time. Those are ways that clients can help themselves as well, correct?
Yes, especially now with email. And also documenting, and when we discuss documenting, it's like first name, last name, date, time, right? When you're reporting in,
right,
making sure, leaving a message and documenting the time that you left the message. Because with the email, the probation officer can say, well, I didn't see it on time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But even if the probation officer didn't see it,
It's
if there was
there.
a violation, they can't say that what you did was willful, because that's what they have to prove in the state of Florida, was that your violation was willful and substantial. If you informed your probation officer, hopefully they respond, then you can always say, look, the evidence is there that I'm intending to comply with my probation, and that helps protect a person. Well, MonaLisa, I thank you so much for coming in and talking to us.
I love it.
And helping us educate the public about probation, and just analyzing a little bit the Meekmill situation and how it applies to all of us, and how it applies to the community and the people who aren't necessarily superstars or celebrities, but need to get information and need to keep themselves from out of the clutches of the criminal justice system. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Honored to be here, and I hope that people actually do research before they're out there being outraged.